If Spain breaks, it won't stay in Spain. Beneath 3.2% GDP growth and record tourism, three structural failures are building simultaneously, each one manageable alone. Together, they're not. To understand Spain's problem, you need to understand one concept: surface growth versus structural health. These are two completely different things, and confusing them is how investors get caught off guard. Surface growth is what you see in the GDP numbers, tourism spending, government investment, EU recovery funds. All of these are pumping money into the Spanish economy right now. Structural health is what's underneath. It's the question of whether that growth is self-sustaining or whether it depends on borrowed money, external support, and demographic conditions that are quietly deteriorating. And most investors never check structural health until it's too late. Spain has strong surface growth. Its structural health is a different story entirely. Let's go through the three numbers that explain why. Spain's government debt stands at approximately $1.6 trillion, roughly 113% of its entire GDP. To put that in context, for every $100 Spain's economy produces, the government owes $113 to creditors. Now, debt alone isn't a crisis. Japan has higher debt and hasn't collapsed. The question is always, what is the debt being used for? And can the country grow fast enough to manage it? Spain's problem is that a significant portion of its debt isn't being used to build productive capacity. It's being used to fund current spending, pensions, public sector wages, and social transfers. This is the difference between borrowing to build a factory and borrowing to pay your monthly bills. One creates future income, the other just delays the reckoning. And the reckoning has a specific date attached to it. Between 2025 and 2035, Spain's baby boomer generation fully retires. Pension costs will spike at exactly the moment the working age population is shrinking. But debt alone doesn't break a country. What breaks it is when the people who are supposed to pay it back start disappearing. And that process has already started. Spain has one of the lowest birth rates in the developed world, approximately 1.19 children per woman. The replacement rate needed to maintain a stable population is 2.1. That gap doesn't sound dramatic, but compounded over decades, it creates a structural collapse in the ratio of workers to retirees. Spain's pension system will have a 1.5 workers per retiree by 2050. That number has never sustainably funded a Western pension system, ever. Immigration has partially offset this. But here's what the optimistic forecasts miss. A large proportion of working migrants in Spain are employed in low-wage sectors: tourism, agriculture, hospitality, high informality rates, lower tax contributions per worker. So the demographic replacement is happening. The fiscal replacement is not keeping pace. And when the pension system finally has to confront that gap, the money has to come from somewhere. Either higher taxes on fewer workers, deeper government borrowing, or cuts to benefits that Spanish voters have been promised for decades. Spain will choose one of them. None are painless. All are coming. Debt is the pressure, demographics is the timeline. But there's a third factor that could determine exactly when this becomes impossible to ignore. Spanish property prices in major cities, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, have risen 30 to 40% since 2020. On the surface, this looks like confidence, demand, growth. But look at who is buying. Non-resident buyers now account for roughly 15% of all Spanish property transactions nationally, up to 30% in Madrid and Barcelona. British, German, and French investors are the top three sources. In high-demand urban markets, that share has been climbing every year since 2020. This is not domestic wealth creation. This is external capital chasing yield. The problem with external capital is that it can leave. Domestic buyers are sticky. They live there. They have mortgages. External investors are responsive to returns. If yields compress, if the euro weakens, if a better opportunity appears elsewhere, the capital rotates out, and it tends to leave faster than it arrived. And when it leaves, it doesn't warn you first. When it does, the correction follows. We know this because we have already seen it. Between 2008 and 2013, Spanish property prices fell 40% nationally. In Madrid and Barcelona, 45%. In coastal markets, over 60% in some areas. And the banks sitting on that exposure today, Santander and BBVA alone carry over $300 billion in Spanish mortgage books. That is not a rounding error. That is a systemic number. This is not speculation. This is the exact sequence that played out between 2007 and 2012. The last time the surface looked fine, right up until it didn't. Here's what most financial coverage gets wrong about Spain. They compare it to Greece. Wrong comparison. The right comparison is Spain. 2006, GDP growing, jobs up, property booming. 2 years later, 27% unemployment. Youth unemployment crossed 55%, a generation financially erased. The last time this setup existed, it erased a decade of wealth in under 3 years. Spain today is not identical to Spain in 2006, but the structural vulnerabilities rhyme closely enough to warrant serious attention. The difference this time is that Spain has less room to maneuver. In 2008, debt was lower. Rates could be cut further. The EU had more political bandwidth to mount a rescue. Today, debt is higher, rates are still elevated, and the EU is simultaneously managing Germany's industrial decline, France's fiscal crisis, and Italy's 2-decade stagnation. The timing is unknown, the direction is not. The warnings were public, the data was available. People just chose to believe the surface. If you're invested in Europe, you don't need to predict this, you just need to not ignore it, because the people who lose the most in these cycles are the ones who thought everything looked fine. That's exactly what Spain looks like right now. One question, and I want your honest answer in the comments. Do you think Spain's growth is real, or is it borrowed time? If this raised questions you hadn't considered, subscribe. Next video, the one European economy that is genuinely getting stronger, while everything around it weakens. Most people won't guess it correctly.